John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. Collectively, they were known as the Beatles, a band whose music in the 1960s influenced an entire generation. But the sterling image that they once held is beginning to tarnish. Numerous books in recent years have revealed a band we never knew, a band heavily into drugs, a band who could not handle their finances, a band whose members feuded so fiercely that it led to their eventual breakup. Now, two college professors from Johns Hopkins want to add to this list. Drs. Stephen Gimber and Barry Hummel are suing the Beatles for plagiarism. I had the chance to speak with them recently near Stephen Gimber's home in Columbia, Maryland. Their story is quite amazing.
We published small literary magazines in the late 50s and early 60s while we were attending Oxford to put ourselves through school. The Beatles came along and stole about 90% of our later material.
It's the Beatles, I'm sure you've heard of them. They became quite famous.
Yes, I'm familiar with the Beatles.
They took our work and, absolutely they plagiarized it.
Yes.
Which is against the law.
The history of their magazine, entitled Vicissitudes, is a roller coaster ride of sorts. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, Dr. Gimber and Dr. Hummel collaborated with an artist friend, the late Stephen Moore. The result? A small literary magazine called Vicissitudinous Verisimilitude. Thus began a long and fruitful relationship which produced many fine works. The magazine was called Vicissitudes?
Vicissitudes, yes.
How did that come about?
Just like this idea.
It's just what we called it, I don't know.
The actual title, of course, the first few magazines was, the full thing, I believe, was Vicissitudinous Verisimilitude.
Yes, which I can't for the life of me remember exactly what it means.
I don't think there was...
Something changes something, I don't know.
The two of us were the editors, and we had one artist who was a very good friend of ours.
Oh yes, Mr. Moore.
How did you meet him?
He was a good chap. He was going to school there too. He was studying film, I believe.
Yes, it was film.
He asked us to do a little work in some of his films.
What did the magazines consist of?
We did all sorts of things. We ran the gambit, actually.
Yeah, well, mostly it was just, real highfalutin types of literature and things like that, and poetry and things
highbrow, haiku. We did some of that. Japanese business, 5 syllables, 7, and then 5.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
It was quite confining, that sort of work, which I didn't enjoy. We got into other stuff later, though. We kind of just went bizarre, crazy.
The craziness to which Dr. Gimber refers to came in two waves. In late 1961, they published their issue entitled Life of a Rhodes Scholar. Their friend, Billy Shears, portrayed death. 2 weeks after the release of the Rhodes Scholar issue, Billy Shears did indeed die.
It was called The Life of a Rhodes Scholar, and then, of course, the last phase of anyone's life
was
death.
And
so
we had a series of people playing each part of a Rhodes Scholar's life. The birth and school and so, marriage and then death.
And that gentleman, after the magazine came out, that gentleman died.
It's the most horrendous thing.
It was about 2 weeks after the magazine came out, the kid who played Death died, and there we sat. We got real bizarre after that. We published a couple of magazines, and they were...
Well, needless to say, his death influenced us a great deal.
Steve had drawn a picture from the inside of a car.
Oh, yes,
and he was driving towards a tree, and there was in the tree was death in the tree, in the bark of the tree. It was an odd picture, and a lot of things looked like, I don't know, there was worms coming out of somebody's head. And
more drug-induced sort of stuff.
No, I don't think we should say that.
Oh, let's not promote drug use. No, we're not promoting drug use at all.
Whether it was their friend's death or drugs that altered their style makes no difference. The bottom line was that their style did indeed change. People waited eagerly for the publication of each issue, but in 1962, the death of Steve Moore ended their 4-year partnership.
He took a holiday to India,
and he was flying back and died in a plane crash.
When did you first realize that there was plagiarism on the part of the Beatles?
Well,
goodness, it was when that album came out.
Yeah, well, they put out Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album in 1967.
The exact same cover as ours.
Well, it was about
similar.
I'd say about 50% of it was identical. I mean, this is so obvious that it was plagiarized. We had what had happened at the time was that I was teaching in London. I was teaching high school in London, and you were in...
So I was teaching up in Coventry.
At the time, and
I was teaching American history.
In England?
Yes, that's the ironic thing, I'm teaching British history here at Hopkins, and when I was in Britain, I was teaching American history.
I saw the album come out in London, and I called Steve on the telephone, you know. I said, Steve, what the hell? I mean, look at this cover.
Hummel gave me a ring, and he told me he was quite upset. So I ran out and purchased a copy of this Sgt. Pepper's.
We saw the Sgt. Pepper's album, you know, and so I called Steve, and I said, Steve, you know, this looks, you know, very much like the Uncle Bugsy's Writers Club issue of the magazine, you know. And he said, yes.
Yes, I had to agree with him.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt in my mind. I mean, it's almost 50% of it's
We
identical.
had brushed it off as coincidence at that point.
I think that was our biggest mistake at that time, brushing it off the first one as coincidence.
The Uncle Bugsy's Crazy Writers Club issue was their last. Penned as a tribute to Steve Moore, it was filled with clues that he had died, but on the surface there was no mention of his death.
We were afraid to admit that we had lost Steve. We were afraid that people would not buy the magazines if the artwork was not done by the same chap.
Wasn't done by the same chap. He was an extraordinary artist.
First of all, there was us in our Oxford attire, you know, on the side.
Proper school attire.
We were looking on to ourselves as characters in a movie that we had done. We were playing nose hairs. We were good at that. That was one of our...
Nose hairs? Whatever brought that about?
Well, that was Mr. Moore's creation.
You know, there's hairs in your nose. Long, black.
It's supposed to keep dust from going in there.
And you played those
Yes,
characters?
we dressed up in black and played nose hairs.
They were characters,
we
but
weren't
not actual
nose
hairs, but we weren't playing a hair, but we were rather characters named nose hairs.
And other people who had done acting for us were on the cover, you know, it was all a very nice piece. And we were all looking down at a thing that said Vicissitudes. It was like a little
like
grave,
flowers or something.
because we were, you know, had buried Steve and we were...
A comparison of the Uncle Bugsy magazine cover to the Sgt. Pepper album makes their case quite apparent. Gimber, Moore, and Hummel, in their school uniforms, stand precisely in the same position as the Beatles in their early attire. The nose hairs become the Beatles' mythical band, and even some of the clues that Steve Moore had died were copied by the Beatles to make it look as though Paul McCartney had died.
And the drum, we had the drum, and even if you cut, you know, our thing in half, it says, my ex-Ed, and it points right to Steve, you see. Well, when you cut the Sgt. Pepper's drum in half, you get, he died, pointing up to Paul, you see. You see, they did the whole...
coincidental.
Well,
I mean,
you know, they made it look like Paul had died, just like we had done when we made it look like Steve had died. And it's so apparent it's not even funny.
Having brushed this off as coincidence, Gimber and Hummel began to catch on with the release of the Magical Mystery Tour album.
But then they had that other one.
Well, then the Magical Mystery Tour came out. It was less apparent because what they had done was they'd taken a staff page from the Uncle Bugsy's issue, you see, and they took that and made a cover out of that. Well, that was less obvious. I mean, people didn't pick that one up.
No one really bothered to look at the staff page so much.
No, it was all walruses and then one Bugsy. One Uncle
one
Bugsy in the middle, who happened to be, you know,
the publisher.
We always called him Bugsy. He had, you know, Bugsy teeth.
He looked like a Bugsy.
They had different animals. We had everybody dressed up the same, you know. And,
but they took our walrus and our Bugsy and they put it in. But
yes, they put it in
the exact
position.
same?
Yes, same position, same. In fact, all they did was change the bloody heads on the things. You know, they just took different animals, you know, and put different heads on them.
Outrageous.
Well, we had always done jokes as a walrus. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, on the life of a...
That's in the life of the student, Rhodes Scholar.
Yes,
walrus
dressed up as a walrus is one of the
But we
phases.
continued that thematic expression in our later magazines.
We also had the evolution of Vicissitudes.
The evolution,
where it went up
had
to a walrus.
Man into walrus.
Yes.
Finally, with the release of the Yellow Submarine album, the plagiarism on the part of the Beatles could not go without mention.
They released the Yellow Submarine album, and I would have to say that that was the most blatant. Well, I wouldn't say it was the most blatant, but it was pretty obvious.
It's quite obvious.
That they had, this was it. I mean, this was 3 in a row. So I called Steve on the phone. There was no doubt in our minds now that it was not a coincidence. It just couldn't be. But the cover was, you know, just a painting. It wasn't. The magazine itself wasn't yellow. I mean, it was more of a greenish red kind of thing. But it was.
So why was it called Yellow?
Because it was part of it was about yellow journalism.
Yellow journalism.
It was a satirical
piece. It had to do with something with
Fleet Street and all that stuff.
Yes.
What we did was we drew all all the characters from the book, from the magazine.
Yes, on the cover.
On the cover, and it was real.
All the characters
real bright colors
involved in the magazine.
Yes, at least
Spoken
most of them,
with.
at least. At the top, in fact, we had even put Farinaccio, the publisher's
Yes,
picture.
yes.
And
His face was disguised with a glove.
Yes,
or
with a
something.
glove. Yes, it has his green hair and mustache. He had green hair. He was just
Then
strange.
we had that. Did we have
And-
a large something at the bottom? Large.
Yeah, a large
bus.
bus. We had
These characters parallel characters in the Beatles film The Yellow Submarine and on the album cover. The gloved face of their publisher, Vince Farinaccio, became the Beatles' flying glove. These basketball players became the Beatles' apple bonkers. This shark became the Chief Blue Meanie. Fat Man was transformed into the Butterfly Stomper. This hermit became the captain of the Yellow Submarine, Old Fred. And finally, this yellow school bus became this Yellow Submarine. At this point, Gimber and Hummel sued the Beatles for the first time.
Oh, and-
This attempt was unsuccessful.
Oh, I would say so. I mean,
Yes,
they
it was
looked like
quite
bloody
awful.
fools. What they did was,
Court system, in fact, did so much as to tell us that we were making a big fuss over nothing. That we should appreciate the great deal of money that the Beatles were generating for the British economy.
which didn't help us at all because we didn't have two pence to rub together at the time.
Talk
Yes,
about the first lawyer.
Yes, that was another thing.
Oh,
that was
a
going-
lawyer. What was that chap's name? He had another name.
The first lawyer?
Yes,
The later
yes.
one. Oh, the first lawyer, Cohen.
Yeah, talk more about him because he's going to give it a piece. So
You're
That's
going to
right.
talk to
You're
Cohen?
going to speak with
If
Cohen.
you see Cohen, tell him he owes me £20, will you? Not dollars. Tell him he can make it dollars. I'll give him the.
Cohen,
I'll
yeah,
give him
that's a
these.
strange name. But you know, that chap, he blew the case for us.
I spoke to the lawyer from the first court case, Maurice Cohen.
First of all, let me get this straight. My name is not Maurice. Morris. They probably told you that just to heckle. I hate heckling. Let me get two other things straight. First of all, I don't owe that overstuffed bag of garbage 5 pence, let alone 2 pounds. Second of all, I didn't lose that case. They lost it for themselves.
He was not very adept at law, let's say.
was he a young
Freshman
fellow
lawyer.
at the time?
Freshman lawyer.
Well, he went to school with us there in Oxford, and we thought he was, quite the pleasant chap.
He had promise, but I think he just
And
played
he went
a
on to
little
law
bit.
school, and we just went on to teach, and he'd gone to law school, and so we called him up, we dialed him on the phone, we said, hey, want to
Give
make
him
some
a
money?
ring.
We got a lot of money coming in here, we're going to sue the Beatles for $20 million, and 10% of that could be yours, for the taking. And he said, oh, that sounds
Yeah,
great.
Of course. Who
Except he
wouldn't?
was an absolutely awful lawyer, and
And you decided not to use him for the second.
obviously
No,
not. Now he's
no.
half senile, he's half baked, I'm not going to call him, but tell him he does owe me some money. I'd like to have it.
The Beatles, fresh from their victory in court, did not stop stealing material from Gimber and Hummel.
The most bizarre and biting things that the Beatles ever did to us.
Adding
was-
insult to injury as it
I
were.
have no doubt in my mind that this was purely intentional. There's no. When we were younger and we had gone to London one time, we had went over to this place called Abbey Road. One day
And,
we thought it'd be kind of nice if we shot a picture of us, at this place, and we just walked across the street. We had, a friend of ours shoot a picture of me and Steve and Steve
And
Moore.
Steve Moore.
And we were walking across the street. That's all.
At
It
the
was a
crosswalk, you say.
I mean, we weren't posed or anything. We were just walking across the crosswalk, and they took a photograph of us. And Steve didn't have his shoes on. He had socks on.
Yes,
if I'm
he
not
was wearing socks that day.
But what happened was, after the court case, after we lost the bloody case, the Beatles released the Abbey Road
This
album.
Abbey Road album of ours.
And on the front was the Beatles
Walking
the
across
very same
the
crosswalk.
same crosswalk. In the same sort
The
of...
same
And
crosswalk?
Yes.
it was so
Who's the
obvious.
chap in the middle? I mean, he had no socks on.
No.
He had just the
He had
opposite.
just bare feet at all. It was Paul.
And so, with such strong evidence, the two Hopkins professors begin their second quest to reap the true financial rewards of their work.
And what made you decide to take action again?
Well, I figured, there's
Time
a couple
has
books that
passed.
come out. Yeah,
Yes.
time is right now, I think.
And the Beatles have now broken up. Lennon is supposedly dead.
I
as
don't
it were.
believe it. We called him about this lawsuit, and they tried to tell us he was dead. I've never heard tell of such a...
I don't put any stock in it. I mean,
don't
after the
believe
way they lied about plagiarizing, you think they'd lie about such a thing as
I just think he's trying to avoid the whole issue altogether.
Nevertheless, so they've broken up and they're all quite rich as it were.
Yeah, now they've got even more money for us to win. Our lawyers, J. William Newby,
This
Nice
is a
guy.
strange name, Newbie. I let Hummel take care of all this legal material because I'm not quite interested in it. All I want is what's coming to me. If you want to go through all the paperwork and the lawyers,
It's, you know, it's got
if
to
we
be
had
done.
to go by whose name, what sort of name we would choose, why, Newbie would be quite good. Newbie was a good pick because it's a strange little name.
J. William Newby is equally optimistic.
We have the remaining Beatles where we want them. They're taking a real beating right now, and their integrity is being questioned all around.
How much do you think you should get from this lawsuit?
Well,
As much as we can.
I'd like to just have, you know, if we had, I figured this out, if we had 0.2% of Paul McCartney's estate, we'd
yes.
be millionaires, you know. 0.2%, I mean, that's not
What
a
was
lot.
the figure that we had? How much money he makes every minute?
He makes about $37 a second, which
Oh,
is...
$37 a
I
second.
don't make $37 a day.
They don't stand a snowball's chance in you know where, if you know what I'm talking about. It's been 15 years, nobody cares. And you can tell those two losers I said so.
Before this suit is over, they'll be begging my clients for mercy. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if McCartney at all tried to settle out of court to eliminate the bad press. My clients would probably accept such an offer because they're not interested in the press, just the money that is rightfully theirs.
Why don't you two publish a book?
There's so many things have been done. I mean, so many things like John Lennon, when he ran off with this woman, what was her name?
Yoga.
No, the other woman.
Oh, he ran off with both of them.
May was it? May Pang or something of that nature? When he went out west, he went out into the west of the United States for a great while.
I think he's still there.
He ran off with this young woman, and she's now writing a book. It was I Love John or something it was called. Yes.
Get more books about
Well, I figure if you publish a book, more people will know about
Yes,
your
but
play.
all this sort of rot is coming out now about the Beatles. We don't want to seem to be chiming in on the carriage. We want what's rightfully ours.
But isn't that exactly what you're doing?
We don't want to
not at
cause
all.
scandal, you see. We just want
We
what's
just want
rightfully ours.
the money.
So the two crazy writers from Oxford are headed back into court. Can they win? Only time will tell for sure. But one thing is for sure, a victory in court would surely deteriorate the legend of the Beatles. For Cable Music Magazine, this is Esther Ponce.